Good evening. Thank you guys for taking the time to be here tonight. My name is Shravika, and I'm going to be beginning with a story about Melissa Oden. Melissa grew up knowing that she'd been born prematurely and that she'd been adopted. However, what she didn't know was that there was this great big secret surrounding it all, that she should have been delivered dead and instead was born alive. In 1977, in a hospital in the state of Iowa, Melissa's 19-year-old mother had undergone an abortion using toxic saline solution over the course of 5 days. Born at 8 months and weighing less than 3 pounds, Melissa was placed among medical waste. That was until a nurse heard her weak cries and witnessed her slight movements. Melissa was rushed to an intensive care unit where she, against the odds, survived. Doctors thought she would be blind and at one stage believed she may even have a fatal heart defect. But she has gone on to live a perfectly healthy life, being brought up by an adoptive family. Melissa says, "It made me feel angry, embarrassed, and ashamed, guilty for surviving. I spent so many years of my life going, why me? Why am I actually alive when there are tens of millions of children who are not as fortunate as me? I think the difference really is that I had people who fought for me. I had medical people who were willing to whisk me off to the NICU, hoping that I would be provided medical care." Melissa is pictured in the center with her birth mother to her right and her half-sister to her left. Her birth mother, Ruth, told her she had never wanted to have an abortion and that she'd been put in a position of feeling forced to go through with the termination. Melissa explains, "What I learned was my grandmother forced the abortion on my mother against her will." Years later, Melissa has found it in her heart to forgive and build a relationship with her biological family. Thanks to her adoptive parents, Melissa was healthy, loved, and fortunate. In fact, Melissa insists she is one of the luckiest people in the world to firstly have survived, and then to have both her adoptive parents and her birth mother in her life. The sad truth is that this isn't the fate of most. In the US alone, more than 800,000 babies are lost each year to abortions. Babies that couldn't grow up in a family that exemplified unconditional love, go to school, receive a high school diploma, or experience, cherish falling in love and someday being a mother or father to their own children. Life doesn't begin at birth or at a certain stage in fetal development. The beginning of life is the very moment of conception, and every abortion performed is a beautiful life that has been lost. So what is conception? Well, some may say conception is equivalent to implantation, which begins 5 days after fertilization. The medical term conception is equated to fertilization, which is the process by which a single sperm gradually penetrates the layers of an egg to form a new cell. Put in simpler terms, it's the joining of the sperm and the egg. For the purposes of today, when I reference conception, I'm discussing fertilization. Moving past conception, we enter into fetal development. At 9 weeks, the fetal stage begins. At this time, the baby's head is more defined and the neck is more developed. The baby's skeleton is forming, but the bones are still soft. Little eyelids form but stay closed, and a nose appears. During an ultrasound, the baby can be seen moving, although the pregnant mother may not feel the movements just yet. At 12 weeks, sex organs differentiate. The baby can open and close their hands and curl their toes, and the baby has the tiniest nails growing on their fingers and toes. At 16 weeks, facial muscles develop, and the baby now weighs in at 3 to 4 ounces and is 4 to 5 inches in length. The backbone and tiny muscles in her back are gaining strength. Her beautiful eyes are finally working too, making small side-to-side movements and perceiving light, although the eyelids are still sealed. Her face is starting to look more like mom or dad. At 20 weeks, hearing begins. As facial features, including the nose, take shape, her sucking reflex is coming along. It's possible she may even suck her thumb this week. Rapid brain growth continues, particularly in the nerve centers dedicated to the senses. The little one is in the process of developing a definite sleep-wake cycle and is also becoming responsive to sounds in the environment. From time to time, loud noises may even wake her. Around this time, baby skin is thickening and layers of skin are forming as well. At 24 weeks, the lungs begin to develop. That beautiful face, though still tiny, is complete with eyelashes, eyebrows, and hair. All kinds of sounds can be heard by this little girl in the womb. Air exhaled from the lungs, mom and dad's voice, which the baby will be able to recognize at birth, and even very loud sounds such as honking horns, barking dogs, or a wailing fire truck. By this point, over 99% of abortions have taken place, while a couple carry over into the beginning of the third trimester. Many will argue that life begins only after birth, or during the third trimester when the fetus looks more human, and dismiss life in order to validate abortions. So when does life begin then? Is it when the baby develops a sense of hearing, or when he or she, still in the mother's womb, recognizes their mother's voice? The mother who is supposed to love and protect them, but instead is allowed to abort them. What differentiates the aborted fetus from a dead baby? Dr. Watson A. Bose from the University of Colorado Medical School states that the beginning of a single human life is, from a biological point of view, a simple and straightforward matter. The beginning of life is conception. This straightforward biological fact should not be distorted to serve sociological, political, or economic goals. Those who are pro-choice believe that everyone has the basic human right to decide when and whether to have children. Some will even go as far as claiming that pro-lifers have little to no care for the mother's safety or well-being, when in fact more than 68,000 women are lost to failed or botched abortions each year. On top of this devastating loss, innocent children are paying the price for a choice made by two adults. But that's the key here: innocent. The child is a miraculous and innocent soul that has entered into the world. So why must the child face the consequences for a choice that the parents have made? The answer is simple. In a moral world, they shouldn't have to. In a moral world, this child would be granted the basic human right to life. There are two main types of abortions. The first being the medical abortion, which consists of two pills called mifepristone and misoprostol. These two drugs work together to terminate a pregnancy. The second abortion is known as the in-clinic abortion or the surgical abortion. This is a medical procedure in which a suction is used to empty out the uterus. These are the two most common methods of terminating pregnancy. However, there are contraceptives that prevent implantation and therefore end the life of the fetus as well. These include the birth control implant as well as Plan B. The birth control implant is implanted under the skin of the upper arm and releases the hormone progestin. This changes the lining of the uterus in order to prevent any fertilized eggs from implanting into the uterine wall and therefore terminates the life of the fetus. Plan B may prevent the union of the sperm and egg fertilization. However, if fertilization has already occurred, Plan B may prevent a fertilized egg from attaching to the womb, implantation, in which case it terminates the life of the fetus. Many pro-lifers are unaware that these contraceptives terminate pregnancy. However, both types of abortions, as well as the contraceptives discussed previously, terminate pregnancy and should be considered murder of the unborn child. So you may be asking yourselves, what makes it the unborn child and not simply a bunch of cells? Well, going back to 8th grade biology, the most basic human makeup is cells. Everyone in this room can be classified as a bunch of cells. But we're more than that. We're people who've been granted the right to life, which is being denied to so many. Each person in this room went from being a fetus to the terrible twos, teenage years, and ultimately adulthood. In the Journal of the Association of Basic Medical Sciences, it is explained that because the fetus has the capacity to become an adult human individual, it must already be one. The same fetus organizes itself into an embryo, a fetus, a child, and an adult. By this account, the fetus is an actual human individual and not simply a potential one, in much the same way as an infant is an actual human person with the potential to develop maturity and not just a potential person. Considering the clear and irrefutable fact that life begins at the moment of conception, the fetus should be granted the inalienable right to life, and an abortion or any type of contraceptive that terminates pregnancy is murder of the unborn child. Thank you. Now, if any of you guys have questions. Yes.
What made you choose this topic?
I actually did an essay my 8th grade year where we were just supposed to write a persuasive essay at the time, and I chose to do my topic on abortions, and my teacher kind of dismissed it. It was in public school, and she just told me, like, you wouldn't understand. You're only in 8th grade. You don't understand the implications of that, what the woman goes through. What if you went to a party and something happened and you came home and you were pregnant? And I told her I would have the child. And I told her that that child's life mattered. And that was kind of the moment that I decided that this is what I wanted to do for my senior thesis. Any more questions? Yes.
So based on your analysis and study on birth control, then which one are there any that are reasonable that don't, in your view, cause?
So, yes. So I did a lot of research on that, and yes, most procedures, most pills and things that you take do prevent implantation. However, those are the two that I found that are specifically preventing implantation: birth control and Plan B. And I went through on Planned Parenthood, looked through basically every contraceptive method that they have, and it looks like the other methods do not do that. So any other form of contraceptive would not prevent implantation.
So they would just prevent fertilization then?
Yes. Yeah.
I know you want to go into the medical field, so how do you think you'll be able to, do you think this will help you in order to be able to express this in your future in medicine?
Yes, I do. I did a lot of research in order to support my idea that life begins at conception, and there's so much hard evidence that life begins in that moment, and that's where that quote that I discussed, where it says that that shouldn't be changed in order to make it easier for people to go through it, make people's lives easier. And there's just so many doctors and so much evidence that it begins right there in that moment. Yes.
Should you go on to medical school? I don't even know the answer to this, maybe you do. Should you go on to medical school and you're doing a rotation that requires you to learn how to perform an abortion, how are you going to handle that? I don't know if they make them do that anymore, but maybe in your research, did you come across that?
That is not actually something that I looked into. However, I know myself, I would simply just excuse myself from it, whatever the consequences may be.
The journal that you quoted,
Mm-hmm.
can you flip back to that? Can you tell us a little bit about that? There it is, the Journal Association of Basic
Yes.
Medical Sciences. Can you tell me a little bit about that journal?
So basically the whole journal just went about proving the fact that, and the logic behind why life begins at conception. And this was just one of the quotes that I found that was actually throughout multiple articles, and so I went in and looked at this journal, and it just goes into depth, and it's super, super long, in-depth reasoning, but I just love that towards the end it explained that, because a lot of people will say because the baby relies on a mother in order to continue living, it's not an actual human life. And so I love the way that it explained just the way that a fetus organizes itself and grows and develops as like an infant does its life. So that's just the quote that I pulled out of it.
Is that journal associated with a specific hospital or university, do you know? Or is it just an industry journal?
From what I saw, it just seemed to be an industry journal.
Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.